Hello and welcome to this Lunch and Learn session on Monday, the 12th of May. Really, this Lunch and Learn session is to tie in with the Mental Health Awareness Week. And the initiative this year, the theme this year is that of community. Now, before we get started, let me just give you a little bit of insight into who I am and what, as founder of My Life Tonic, what we aim to do, how we support both individuals and organizations. So, as founder of My Life Tonic, initially my key focus was that of yoga and encouraging, supporting people to be physically active. However, as I delved more into the wellness, well-being space, largely through interest, but also through personal experience, it was becoming clear that actually sometimes yoga for me was not enough. And so I started to look into various ways in which we can support our mental health, but also our well-being. And I think the two are ultimately intrinsically linked. For me, post-COVID, I know that I was struggling with a little bit of challenges with mental health. And so the yoga wasn't necessarily providing all that I hoped and thought it may do. And that's when I started to look into different frameworks of mental health and also ways and frameworks which we can support ourselves. As a mental health first aider as well, also found the insights provided through that training that made me realize that I need to, one, keep a check on my own mental health, as well as being able to support and guide others, one, to identify if there are those challenges that people are struggling with themselves, but also to support and be aware of those around. And what really struck me with Mental Health Awareness Week is how relevant it is. So this year, obviously, the theme is community, the importance of community. But looking back over the last couple of years, they have focused on the importance of spending time out in nature, loneliness and the effect that that can have on our mental health, as well as issues of anxiety. So in my mind, both Mental Health Awareness Week is a great opportunity to raise awareness of our mental health, but also start to provide people, organizations, and individuals with frameworks that they can take going forward throughout the rest of the year to make sure that their mental health is something that can be maintained. And I think the importance with mental health is that it's not something that is static. We go through ups and downs, it fluctuates. So we need to continually maintain and be aware of how we're feeling and whether our mental health is something that can work with and need some improvement. I think community is such a great subject for Mental Health Awareness Week. And ultimately, having that sense of community, again, from a personal perspective, I know that in periods of times when I felt a bit out of kilter, that I've withdrawn myself from the local community, whether it be previously with work colleagues or various exercise groups that I have been involved with. And that sense of community can be so important just to lift the spirits, to help get you out of a funk if you may indeed be feeling in that way. So over the course of the next 20 minutes, I will be firstly outlining why community matters so much. I'll also be bringing into that sense of when you are part of that community or you have a community that you feel intrinsically linked to, what is that sense of belonging? What's the benefits that that community, that sense of belonging can have? And also, why is belonging important? What are the impacts it can have on us as individuals? What's the impact on the mental health and how you can then start to see those benefits resonate in your day-to-day life and experiences? What are the potential barriers that you may be experiencing to find that sense of belonging? And being aware of those barriers can then also be something we can address and we can start to be aware of so that they become less of a barrier and also something that we can appreciate and acknowledge. Particularly within the workplace, how can we build that sense of belonging? So how can that sense of belonging be nurtured within that environment. After all, we do spend over a third of our lives at work if we are traditionally working Monday to Friday. And then there's just a few suggestions of what we could try to generate that sense of community, and that may be inside or outside the workplace. And then finally, just to outline various ways that My Life Tonic can support both individuals and organizations so that we can help foster that sense of belonging, how we can help maintain people's positive mental health. And I really think, just as a recap, the most important thing that we can really hope to generate and create after this week of lunch and learns of awareness of mental health is really to acknowledge that it's something that if we have the right framework and the structures around us, that we can, in fact, maintain a positive mental health throughout the rest of the year. So use this more as a kickstart for us to be more aware, to be able to support not only ourselves, our friends and family, but also our work colleagues around us. So I guess really the first question is why community matters. Now, one thing I have done in these presentations is really try to use real photos. So not being dependent on various library shots that look maybe slightly unrealistic. So this is me running and at night doing some training or early in the morning. And really to pull through that sense of doing things by yourself can sometimes feel, one, quite lonely, two, quite tough, and three, ultimately can take that little bit more dedication required to get out and do it. And so in this instance, for example, running with people, doing, whether it's fitness regimes or hobbies, doing it with others can help you and give you that support network to make it feel that little bit easier. And also, first and foremost, that shared experience can then help generate that sense of connection that you may have with individuals and also make whatever it is you're doing, whether it's work, whether it's sport, whether it's hobbies, slightly more enjoyable. And you may also then start to see that you maybe work that little bit harder. You can challenge yourself a little bit more because you're doing it with someone else. And particularly in this case, getting up early in the morning or late at night to do those runs, if you've got someone depending on you, can give you that prompt that you need to get out. But also, why community matters, probably more now than ever, is that 1 in 4 of us often have a sense of loneliness. So actually, if we're feeling more isolated, that can have a negative impact on our mental health. To the point that those of us that feel lonely or experience loneliness are 20%, 26% more likely to struggle with areas and issues such as depression. It's not just a mental health perspective that loneliness can have that impact, though. For someone suffering with chronic loneliness over a long period of time, obviously, if it's chronic, it can be the equivalent. It can have the negative impact of the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So whereas we think of loneliness being and being a lack of a community being something that is a mental health perspective, it can also have detrimental impacts on our physical health as well. So something certainly to be aware of. One thing I find is, unfortunately, as of concern, is that of the community within the UK, it's the 16 to 24-year-olds that seem to be suffering and struggling most with loneliness. And if you put that in the context of the access to digital communities, time on their phone, that actually feeling that sense of loneliness within that age group is something that perhaps we need to be very mindful of and aware and look to try and address within that age group. Otherwise, it will filter through to our older age groups and become more of an issue and potentially exaggerate those issues of chronic loneliness that I said has the physical negative impact. Just bringing back to why community is important, though, is ultimately if and when someone has that sense of belonging within a community, their life satisfaction scores tend to go up by 2.5 times. So if we can bring a sense of belonging, generate a sense of community, we not only have our mental health benefits, we have our physical benefits, but we also have an emotional benefit in the fact that people are feeling happier, more content with their lives. So what is belonging? So I've put up here a little puzzle game that we played on Journeys called Fit IQ. It's like a 3D jigsaw that you need to try and place the different elements, the different pieces into to make them fit. And I think this is really a pretty good analogy for outlining what is that sense of belonging. Because ultimately, you'll see here that we have different shapes, different colors, different sizes of the pieces that need to fit. And that's ultimately what that sense of belonging is. Each and every one of us in the village or the town, in the workplace or in the community, a faith group or even a sports group, we all want to or aim to try and fit in. But the key thing is about trying to fit in with that sense of belonging is that we feel comfortable within ourselves, within the shape, the size, the color that we are. We don't need to adjust ourselves to try and fit in. We are comfortable and confident and feel safe in that environment that we can be ourselves. And with regards to that, that sense of belonging is being ourselves allows us to express ourselves honestly in a safe environment. So ultimately, if we are talking about a sense of community, whether it's in the workplace, at home, friends, family, or within your social group, that finding that environment where you feel safe to be who you are, who you want to be, is a great starting point in terms of generating that sense of belonging. And if you have that sense of belonging, you're going to feel more comfortable being in that community. So why is the sense of belonging important? Well, I've alluded to that sense of community, the physical and emotional and the health benefit, but actually can have a positive impact in our day-to-day operations, our day-to-day routines. So if you have a great sense of belonging, I also outlined earlier that a sense of belonging will increase your life satisfaction by 2.5 times. It will also help you sleep better. Now, if you're familiar with My Life Tonic, we write regular blogs in terms of various benefits that people experience from sleeping, from staying hydrated to activity through to spending time outside. If you're able to sleep more, it helps to prevent that potential downward spiral. If you feel more satisfied with your day-to-day routine, with your life, again, that can have that positive impact. But also, it can reduce the likelihood of experiencing anxiety and depression. So if you combine those elements together, just those three alone, so increased satisfaction, increased resilience against feeling anxiety and depression, and then sleeping better, it's a great foundation for at least all of us to be starting on. And although I am focusing a little bit on the sense of belonging within the workplace, it's not exclusive to the workplace. That sense of belonging can then resonate and have that positive impact wherever you find that sense of belonging. In terms of having a sense of belonging as well, if you don't have that sense of belonging, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to be affected with low moods. So again, that emotional well-being. From a work perspective, those that have a sense of belonging are 50% more satisfied within their workplace. There's a 50% less turnover within the workplace. So if you're looking at it from a purely work perspective, you're involved with creating that sense of community, then by generating that sense of community can have a really positive effect. And also within the workplace, if there is that strong sense of belonging, there's a 75% reduction in the number of sick days. So in terms of levels of productivity, the output, the sense of community we've had in the workplace, it's almost really not a nice to have. It's actually critical to have because it will resonate and have longer impact in terms of productivity, reducing recruitment costs, for example. And then later in the week, I'll talk about what community in the workplace can look like. In terms of the impact within the mental health, I've kind of alluded to a few of those things earlier. So we have a greater emotional resilience. We have greater resilience in terms of when we come up against certain obstacles within the workplace, certain challenges. There's always going to be an unexpected spanner thrown into the works at some point. If we're feeling that sense of belonging, if we have that community around us, we are then able to address those challenges more effectively. We also have a sense of purpose, for example, if we're clear in the direction of which we need to be traveling, what we're trying to achieve within the workplace, then that sense of purpose, that sense of community will help us override any of those challenges, which will invariably come in any shape or form. By having that sense of community also will allow there to be enhanced chemistry within the individuals within that community. And as we look to make changes, to make positive changes, whether it's in the workplace or at home, by having that community, they can be supported in making those changes. So barriers to creating that sense of connection. Well, in today's world, most of us having lived through COVID, the picture, I think, says a lot in terms of the risk of digital disconnection. We may feel more connected. Remember, the 16 to 24-year-olds have that highest rate of loneliness. Working from home provides us so many more opportunities and benefits, but actually it can also make us feel less disconnected with our work colleagues. We can feel isolated in the fact that we haven't got the chance to get to know our work colleagues, for example, as well. We miss those sort of casual chats, getting coffee, going for lunch, going for a walk at break time, at lunchtime. So we also need to be mindful of that potential disconnection that can and has originated from the new remote working or hybrid working that more and more of us are experiencing. Could also mean that because we don't have that chemistry, that it's harder potentially to create that safe and inclusive environment. Now, within that working environment, trying to find ways that we can connect with each other more socially rather than just going from back-to-back meetings. And it can be tough. Having worked in the corporate environment up until 2019, I fully understand what it's like to have a busy diary, and the fact that our diary can get backed up back to back with meetings, and increasingly with online meetings. Maybe the day starts earlier and maybe goes later, but actually we're not giving ourselves time to connect with those around us rather than just going from one meeting to the other. It's not quite the same being purely online, but we do need to be mindful of when we do have the opportunities to connect with our colleagues, with our friends, that we take that opportunity to do so. And lastly, one barrier can be that anxiety of potential rejection. If we are generating or trying to create a sense of community and that those initiatives haven't worked, it can make us slightly more reticent to keep trying. So how can we build that sense of belonging, a sense of belonging within the workplace? Well, this is one way. Regular weekly classes with clients, people from all round an organization can join and accept that people will be of different levels, different experience and different fitness. But by getting together in a physical environment, doing something together can really help create that sense of community. It can also help introduce people from different departments that may not otherwise have known each other. And creating that sense of community gives that safe environment, that inclusivity that as and when those individuals come together in a work environment can help break down those barriers. Offering to help people can be a great way to help break down those barriers. Volunteering, doing something outside of your regular day-to-day workplace. Ask questions. And when I say ask questions, not necessarily within the work environment, but just ask, how someone is and genuinely, actively listen to what their response is without crossing any boundaries. Really try and get to know the individuals that little bit more so that there is that sincere connection. So, as I've said, these lunch and learns are short sessions where I can just hopefully introduce various concepts and also outline and emphasize the importance of, in this case, community. So from final thoughts, what we can do to help create, one, that sense of community for the others, but also where do we as individuals feel like we belong? And so the first question ultimately is, when do we feel most like ourselves? When do we feel comfortable, when we fit in? We can be ourselves, we can express ourselves freely. Community doesn't just happen. Community is a practice. We need to all take responsibility to make inclusive, friendly, welcoming environments, whether it's in the work environment or at home. Just thought, what can you do today to help generate that sense of community, to be inclusive, to help someone deal with the challenge of either being lonely or not feeling part of a community? Here are just a couple of thoughts. You can reach out, offer help, support someone either in the work or social environments. Be authentic, be true to yourself. If you're true to yourself, you're more likely to be able to be sincere and attract others that have those same value systems. And a community doesn't happen overnight. You can just start small. Start with small walks or conversations with individuals and just see where it takes you. And also celebrate difference. So very much like the analogy of the jigsaw puzzle, celebrating difference can actually in itself bring a group of people together rather than apart. So just in summary here, I've outlined some of the benefits of a sense of community. I mentioned that having frameworks to support our own mental health has been important to me. So moving away from just purely physical activities, but also understanding frameworks of what can support our mental health. And two of the frameworks that I found particularly helpful, one was the 5 pillars of well-being. And going back to some of the initiatives, the themes that have been used for Mental Health Awareness Week, it's not potentially surprising that we've had last year was about being active. This year, it's about a sense of community, a sense of belonging. But other themes have also been about being mindful, being more present. Sometimes going out into nature can help facilitate that. And the two other maybe less obvious ones are to continue learning in any shape or form. It doesn't have to be for exams. It can just be to get the neural pathways triggered, and doing things slightly differently. And then also experiencing the benefits of giving, either as the giver or receiver. So that's the 5 pillars. Atomic Habits is also a great framework to help create change. I talked about starting small in terms of creating a community. That is ultimately what Atomic Habits is all about. But understanding what the triggers are, what the action is, and how you can reward yourself to make any of those small changes more sustainable in the long term. Bringing those together is really what the essence of My Life Tonic is. Offering year-round support for communities, for organizations. We need to appreciate that everyone is different. People may not want to do yoga. People may not want to do physical activity. And understanding what those differences are, we have created a number of what we call Life Tonics. And Life Tonics are small changes that people can do on a daily basis that can help make them feel better. It may help improve their well-being. And that may be through getting enough sleep, trying less time on a digital device, through to 20 minutes exercise, 20 minutes outside each day. So they're all small changes that you can integrate into your daily routine so that they can become a habit. We've also recently created a scorecard to help people understand what are the makeups of their well-being. And in terms of once you have that scorecard, they're potentially making the necessary changes. We also offer organizations monthly sessions tailored to their needs so we can support employees in the way that they are needed. Weekly emails can provide a prompt to help establish those habits. So thank you for joining today's first session, first lunch and learn about the importance of community. Over the next 5 days, I will be going into a bit more detail to help provide more insights in terms of why community is important, how we can action those changes to have a positive impact on the communities that we interact with. Thanks for joining and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Kirsty. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Oh, just a quick question while I got you, Tim. Are you going to be recording all of these sessions?
I am, yes. Is that okay?
Yes, I'm very much interested in what you're going to be covering this week, but the timings for me are a little bit off, so it may be that I have to refer back to the recordings.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, I will be recording. So what I'll be doing is